Hi, welcome back again. This is Nora Solo, episode 2. Nora Finch of Rock Your Life, the podcast. And I am going to jump right into it today. And I'm actually going to start this episode by reading one of my favorite books that's actually like a Bible to me. And I was my show today. I'm calling The Power of Oneness after this book by Sandra Brossman, Brossman. And I encourage you all who are interested, because I'm not going to read the entire book, but I'm going to be reading clips from it, maybe without different episodes. I'm really not sure if I'm going to do them all in order, but the best place to start of what I'm going to talk about is from the beginning. So I'm actually going to read the introduction. Okay, so this is Introduction to the Power of Oneness, Living the Life You Choose. This is going to help explain a lot of the stuff I talk about. Okay, so the book you are about to read is a spiritual book. Because the word spiritual may have different connotations for each of us, I feel it is important to clarify what the word spirit really means. The Latin root word of spirit is spiritus, which literally means breath. Remembering this helps us to release the perception that spirituality is a remote concept separate from our physical reality, or that it is synonymous with religion. It also helps us to realize that there is no such thing as a non-spiritual person. The simple truth is that if we breathe, we qualify as being spiritual. With this in mind, this book applies to everyone that is, who is committed to taking responsibility for truly healing his or her life. True healing requires that we are open to reaching beneath the outer symptoms of the pain and disease that we are experiencing individually and as a society, by choosing to work from the inside out, from the core level of our being. Because spiritual healing acknowledges the whole person, it automatically has a positive effect on our mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Okay, so she goes on to talk about each chapter, and I'm just going to read a little bit on it, and it's totally a book that you can just pick up and flip through it. Okay, so Part 1 is about remembering our spiritual truth, and while this is technical in nature, it discusses the universal principles that lay the foundation for understanding our creative human nature and how the energy of our thoughts, words, and actions create our personal reality. Okay, and then about how to survive our outer world and how to use our energy and that sort of stuff. Okay, then part 2 is healing our past, which are more personal in that we apply the spiritual truth principles as discussed in part 1 for our personal lives. We are guided through a healing process, starting with opening our minds to change and healing our emotional wounds from the past through forgiveness and identifying the self-limiting beliefs. And then part 3 is discussing our inner power to integrate spiritual values, and guided through dynamic visions process, which demonstrates how to use our energy to manifest our ideal reality. Okay, so this book is it's really very helpful on many levels, because she just says the words so perfectly and explains things definitely in layman's terms. And just bringing up the energy topic is that I like to remind people that we are matter, and matter is made up of energy. Okay, and so that's how all of that comes together. And so a couple of other pages that I wanted to read on this, and I didn't want to spend the entire episode reading from this book, but I just wanted to mention a couple of things that have to do with our healing process and what that means, and basically reclaiming our self. And so where do we begin in our healing is that it begins at the level of self and the awareness that change is necessary, and that the time has come for us to change a perception we have collectively adopted of seeing ourselves as victims of our environment. This is a disabling perception which makes us feel angry with things they are doing to us. Yet, can we truly believe that each one of us has not played some part in creating the world we are seeing? Our outer existence is a summary of our collective personal inner values. The very social institutions that we feel are failing us are merely mirror images of the society that built them. We are the people who own the companies, manage the companies, work in the companies, elect the government officials, are the government officials, choose the medical professionals, are the medical professionals, teach the students, are the students, lead the religions, follow the religions, and are the members of our own families. We have magnified our thoughts in grandiose measure by constructing social institutions which echo our personal values. Why do we seek to blame? If we insist on thinking there is an enemy, perhaps we need to consider what the cartoon character Pogo said: we have met the enemy and he is us. The external confusion we are experiencing in our homes, at work, in school, and all around us is not some form of divine punishment. This idea comes from a perception which assumes we are at the mercy of a physical world that happened to us. As humanity matures, we are coming to realize that our physical circumstances do not create our thoughts. It is the other way around. The world we are seeing with our physical eyes is what we have created together through the collective energy of our thoughts and actions. Okay, we can only change the quality of our collective present reality by taking personal responsibility for the part we have each played in creating it. And this all begins at the level of the self. Okay, so when we change our lives, the world around us changes as well. Okay, so I know that was a lot, but you kind of needed to hear those parts, and basically saying when I go into next talking about where how we know what we know is talking about the authoritarian rule. And while that can go into very deep subject, and you all can go back and study on your own if you were to look up about this authoritarian rule, but what I briefly wanted to say on it is basically, um, for the longest time, right, this sort of ruling, which is basically, I'll give you an example, is that back in the day when you didn't listen, there was a consequence, right? We've been taught from the beginning that, told no. And so that's repressed and suppressed us. And being told no, those of us that have followed under that rule, right, from parents or authority figures, that in when you didn't follow the way, there was some sort of consequence or punishment, whether you were thrown in a dungeon or you were spanked or you were grounded or whatever it was. And so that's where a lot of those roots have come from, and why we feel restricted. So a lot of us, I think, still feel like we don't really understand that part, that historically that's what's been going on. So that's what we talk about when those of us in personal growth, you've heard us talk about programming and conditioning and that kind of language. That's what we mean, is that we've had all these sorts of influences and, like I said, authority figures before us that have been guiding and influencing us. And I would lump in there organized religion. So, and this is also where we get our judging of ourselves, judging of others, the fear of caring what other people think, holding back from maybe what we might want to do and say, and then also feeling like we have to live our lives according to somebody else. Okay, so that's where all that structure comes into play there. Okay, so now that I have explained all of that, and you can see for yourself if it rings true to you, but again, that's not something that I've made up. It is actually one of the disciplinary styles, which, if you want to study more, and this also helps with conflict resolving and with parenting, it's called democratic disciplining. Okay, so now moving on is that going into the American culture and the outside, I would say, things that kind of determine whether or not we are valuable enough, and people don't really care about, our inner character, is that we are shown that it is all about our physical image, what we own, how we appear to others, and that term maybe you've heard of, keeping up with the Joneses, okay, what you drive, all these sorts of things, who you know, okay. Or another example would be, when I have that fat diamond ring or that huge house or whatever, those sorts of things, then I'll be somebody. Somebody will like me. Now I'm worth something. Okay. So that is that example there. And so all of that that's been ingrained in us, again, I want to ask you if, that's true for you, is that we take that with us into our adult life, and it affects how we operate in the world. And so I want you to ask yourself if this is true for you, if you think these things have influenced you, okay? Because they have for me, including another example of my dad always making decisions for me. Okay, so now soaking that up, we had all of those influences going on in our lives. So there was a lot of this that I always knew as a teenager, but it wasn't until about age 23 where I was really awakening, and I was really just seeing, like, wait a minute, are these my thoughts or somebody else's? Like, that's not my truth, that's not my reality. And whatever it was, maybe it was stereotyping a group of people, maybe it was just whatever it was, judging somebody, and so many things were also very fear based. And I realized as I pushed myself through these different challenges, a lot of my fears were all in my head, which is, I love one of my favorite acronyms, which is for fear, which is false evidence appearing real. Okay, so during about that time and at that same time, that's how I was also learning to build social skills, opening my own business. And my mom, who was highly psychic, but she did not really teach me, how to kind of read my mind. And I just had some thoughts one day, which is for another story. But how I started to study about the power of the subconscious mind and how I could make things happen with my mind. So always talk about that book. It's called The Power of the Subconscious Mind. And I can't remember the author's last name, Stephen something. Okay, so I know this was a lot to soak up, so I'm actually going to try to go ahead and wind down and talk about this part. As I told you, my awakening period and me realizing what, was true for me about the world. And while I had just finished schooling, so I'm licensed in aesthetics. And when I was learning about holistic health in healing and knowing that I could heal my own body, just even for a stomach ache or whatever it was, I saw again how much the mind was involved, and learning about how Eastern medicine actually helped explain things that Western medicine could not. So, incorporating all of that sort of knowledge, this is where I just further enhanced my skills and different things there. And then again, the creating in my life and learning about, how to do that. That was at that stage. So, in knowing all of this and talking about the power of oneness, is that, and what I wanted to share in talking, about this book is mindset training, how to stay mentally fit, disciplined. I'm able to do that more so, or even more so, because I know that I can create in my life. And all of these sorts of issues that I have had my life, feeling from that low sense of self worth, and having those temporary, very temporary, I call it, suicidal thoughts from a young age, is that, I can relate to those feelings of just feeling very low and negative, and dealing with my own body image issues. And if you go back and actually watch some of my YouTubes, I talk about being hypnotized by my couple of female friends that I had, and then my issues with my mom, who was a narcissist. And I didn't grow up with her, but not being able to speak up with her with just, if you want to call it, emotional manipulation, going on with that, and then learning to be assertive in life. So, going back to ending this episode on when you learn more about how powerful you can be in reclaiming your power, and that you can reclaim your power, you can actually really experience all these things that people before us have talked about. Anything in life is possible if you believe in yourself. And I really feel like a lot of them didn't really tell you how to get there. They may have talked about self love, they may have said work on yourself, but I feel like they really didn't really tell us how. And so I'm really hoping with my storytelling and me documenting, my life journey, that I'm going to be able to share with you, so you can apply this in your life and see how I have done this, and show you all my magical formulas and things like that for creating. Okay, so in the meantime, I encourage you to get this book, The Power of Oneness, that I'll be reading from, and also The Power of the Subconscious Mind. And there are tons of other books I may talk about, but this is what I'm going to start with. So, again, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for listening. This is Nora of Rock Your Life.